Okay, everyone, we're going to call the monthly Kern Valley Healthcare District Board of Directors meeting to order at 6 o'clock. Item B on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion.
Okay, moved by Director Durr, seconded by Director Knight. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that is passed. Thank you. Item 1 is the flag salute. Director Cassis will lead the flag salute.
I'll face the flag and follow after me. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And those that wish to remain standing, our CNO, Mark Gordon, will lead the invocation.
Heavenly Father, we come before you this evening to make some decisions and recognize some individuals for the healthcare district. We hope that you would bless each and every decision made and just have your guidance on all of the decision makers in this facility. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Item 3 is our mission statement. Director Durr will lead us in the mission statement.
We will provide high quality, efficient patient care services that respond to community and provider needs. We will provide leadership and health promotion and education for our patients, residents, medical staff, employees, and community throughout the district.
Just in time. Item C is the oath of office. This will be carried out by our board secretary, Kay Knight, and that is myself and incoming directors Sherry Montez and Jean Parks. So if you please come forward for oath. Yeah, she wants to go to the podium.
Okay. Where
You want them in front here?
yeah, why don't you come up with
Yeah, we have it, the video here catches.
We'll just.
Please raise your right hand to take the oath of office. I, and state your name, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations. Okay, thank you, Director Knight. Item D is the public comment portion of the meeting. Is there any public comment this evening?
Oh, I have some.
Yes, well, let me read this first. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons to address the board on any matter not on this agenda but under the jurisdiction of the board. They may ask a question for clarification, make a referral to staff for factual information, or request staff to report back to the board at a later meeting. Also, the board may take action to direct the staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. The board cannot take action on items not listed on the agenda for action. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Please state your name before making your comment. So, sir, go ahead.
Jim Dees, so may I also refer to things that are on the agenda?
You want to come up here, Jim?
Sure. Thank you.
So for items that are already on the agenda, we have a public comment period for those items. This is just for items not on the agenda.
Okay, well, those were most of my questions, but and comments, but I do have a question about whether the district is trying to find ways to save money.
Constantly.
Good. One question, you've probably been asked this before, is why are we using expensive water to water grass so we can buy a mower and pay somebody to mow it? Is there another option? Zero escape, rock, something like that?
Bob?
Mr. Easterday?
Well, I'm not sure that we have not talked about going to something like zero escape. But one of the reasons that we purchased the lawnmower was to save approximately $20,000 a year over a purchase service to
24,000.
24,000. And so we are absorbing those hours of labor out of the existing maintenance staff. I mean, we can certainly look at other options, I mean, down the road to have less grass and things. Certainly an option.
Our hope was that we'd have a building on it.
Yeah,
We did.
we thought we were
Got
gonna
some
build a
parcel
building
tax
and,
and then we wouldn't have the
yeah,
grass.
then we would have
Someday.
taken most of the grass out.
Right.
All right.
Mr. Diesel, does that help answer your question?
Yes and no. I mean, it sounds like maybe it hasn't been considered, but you will consider it.
Certainly, I think that it has been discussed before that what we were spending per month for lawn maintenance and grounds maintenance, and that answers actually both of your questions, because that is one example of how we're trying to save money, and that does save $2,000 a month by absorbing it within our current employees. We're not hiring anybody extra to do it. So it will save $24,000 and get the job
Won't they
done.
be taken away from another task?
I think, pardon?
Won't they be taken away from another task?
If I know Bob, I doubt that.
Well, obviously, there's only so many hours in a day, and so yes, will it take a few hours away? But I have two staff who have said that they want to step up and be able to do that.
Thank you. I think my 3 minutes are gone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other public comment this evening? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Again, these are items that are routine and non-controversial. There was one typo that was pointed out to me on page 7 of last month's board meeting minutes. Under item 6, Chief Financial Officer report, it says year-to-date surplus. It should be year-to-date deficit. So that will be an amendment to the consent agenda with that correction.
No. The report is surplus, isn't it?
No.
You sure?
Motion to do this with that change.
Okay. Move to accept the consent agenda by Director Durr. Is there a second?
I will second.
Okay, second by Director Bush. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, that has passed. Item F is the reports. Number 1 is the foundation report. Ms. Walowich is not here, so Ms. Cass, I guess you're giving the report this evening.
I don't have too much to report, but I do want to let Dave Durr and Kay Knight know that the foundation received a donation in honor of your service to the district and the community. So I just wanted to share that with you. And also the foundation received $1,250 from West America Bank. We're looking to do some health education classes next year, maybe some symposiums. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions for Ms. Cass? Hearing none, moving on to item 2 is the auxiliary report. Cindy Rubert, auxiliary report.
Thank you. Well, I don't have a lot to report. We're getting
Christmas. We've had some awesome days down at the thrift store. Over the weekend, we had another incident down there, somebody cut into the fence again, but we are taking steps, I should say, to correct that. Bob was kind enough to check into a new security system for us. We're anxiously awaiting our Christmas party, of which I've got, I think, just about all the RSVPs except yours.
Really?
Yeah.
Shocking.
I know. So, but we hope to see everybody there. It's next Wednesday at the Eagles at 12 o'clock noon. And that's about all I have.
Are there any questions for Ms. Ruber?
Thank you.
Hearing none, we'll move on to medical staff. Dr. Finstead is not here unless he provided a written report. Had no report? Okay. Item 4 is the Chief Executive Officer report. Mr. McGlue.
Right, thank you. Just a continued follow-up on our community health needs assessment. This last week, we had spent an entire day working on developing strategies for 2 of the 3 primary areas that were identified in the community needs assessment that were of concern to the Valley here. First was in diabetes care, and then the second was behavioral health. We literally had 2 4-hour meetings dealing with each one of those topics last Thursday. Came away with a number of strategies of things that we need to work on, some of which will be new revenue generating items, new programs for the hospital. Some of these are going to be items that we'll be able to do ourselves. Others will be items that we have to work with other community agencies on to try and bring those services here to the Valley. And so we had some great participation in there and some great ideas that came out. We are now fleshing each of those items out to create individual action plans for them that will become the basis of the strategic plan. And so very pleased with the direction it's going so far, and we'll be sharing that with the board shortly. The third item on there, the third major issue that was identified was access to primary care. As part of our review of community resources and so forth, that we have issues in providing enough physician care up here. And so we're working on some strategies to do that, one of which will be presented later tonight. So I'm not going to say more about it until later. Pleased to announce, again, we participate with the California Critical Access Hospital Network. I have chaired that committee for 3 years now. Been desperately looking for someone to take that over. And so today is our meeting this morning, beginning in January. I will now be the past president of that group. I'm very happy about that. But it's been an organization of critical access hospitals, 34 critical access hospitals just like ours, around the state of California, all geared towards trying to meet the needs of rural communities they serve. So that group where we sit down and share ideas and strategies of what works in each community, that we can hopefully take to other communities and replicate those successes. We've negotiated through the network a number of preferred vendors that we use that have saved the hospital district significant money. And so we're going to continue those efforts as we move forward into the future. And I will be obviously a major part of that organization, but I will not be chairing it anymore, which obviously frees up some time for me, which I'm very happy about. We are continuing to work on employee staffing solutions. We have, obviously there's shortages all over in healthcare right now, in areas sometimes that were never issues for us before. CNAs is a great example. Again, we've had our relationship with Saracosa, who has historically put out a number of CNAs for us, several times during the year. Again, when the ECHO program was going, again, they were encouraging kids from the high school to get involved with these health careers, which put a lot more people into that pool. And when that program went away, it's been harder and harder to get kids to consider that as an option and so forth. So we have had to go on. Obviously, we're in the process right now of submitting applications. It's already been submitted for develop our own CNA training program. We had one before. So there's times when Saracosa has to have a certain critical number of patients or of students in their program in order to make it work financially. And when that hasn't happened, we've basically gone 6 months without being able to recruit another CNA here, which kills us. So, that's our strategy. But CNA, they've actually had a number of classes now. We actually have a CNA pinning ceremony this Thursday night. We have a class graduating. And, so hopefully we will be able to recruit a good number of those. We've usually been pretty successful in the past with doing that. But again, what we're looking for is, again, we use a number of recruitment firms or registries for nurses when we have shortages or people call off and so forth. Actually, through the CCAN network, there is a group called Medifis, which actually provides staffing for hospitals around the state and elsewhere. And another company called AMN that actually uses Medifis's software and their systems. And so our staff is kind of looking at both of those options to see what makes sense for us. They can save us some considerable money. They're in use with a number of the hospitals up Northern California and Central California, and been having great success in getting people placed. And so we're exploring those opportunities right now, which we hope will cut our reliance on some of these very high cost staffing companies that we've been using. So again, another way we're trying to save money. We had a meeting a day last week, which we've, Mark, this is really credited to Mark in putting this together, was a first responders meeting. And we brought together members from the Sheriff's Department. We had Sheriff Sergeant Frisbee was here, and Lieutenant De Leon from Bakersfield came up. We had the captain from the fire crew here. We also had our ambulance company was here, the Met team was here. Just talking about a number of the issues and concerns that we've had here within our hospital, but also within our community about what's going on with resources and how quickly they can respond to certain incidences that go on. We have agreed to meet on a quarterly basis or more often as necessary. And, again, I think they were each shared a number of the concerns they've had, obviously with their own staffing shortages, especially within the Sheriff's Departments, which was of particular concern primarily because we just discovered recently that the city of Bakersfield actually passed their sales tax measure, which will now offer them an opportunity to raise the salaries of the police department. And so there's an expectation they have 100 open slots that a number of these young sheriffs will now switch to the city of Bakersfield, which will leave them substantially in a bad spot in trying to cover the rural communities. And so these were some of the topics that we talked about, and obviously trying to understand, how we can help each other and work towards making sure that we can provide the services that the community needs. So very pleased. We had a great first meeting. Everybody showed up. And, we'll keep you apprised of some of the topics that come out of that, but, the big one right now is obviously the county was, hoping that they get their sales tax in place so that they can get the sheriffs, a little bit more money, because we're the lowest paid county in the state of California for the sheriff's department.
The sense that I had is that we needed, because we're not incorporated, we're not a city, we're just up here kind of flailing. We don't have a voice in the community, from the community, down in the district.
Right.
So I wanted to have a united front to be able to go down there and hear our concerns. So that was the idea behind what, organizing that meeting.
Take those to the supervisors if necessary,
Yes,
or whatever. So again, I appreciate Mark pulling that together. And like I said, I think everybody felt that we got a much better working understanding of how they work and how they staff and things that we need, even with the Met team. We've been making calls to the Met team, and that's the mental health response team. We have a crisis patient that we've been calling them directly, but they don't call back. And then at that meeting, found out that they take all of their calls through the sheriff's office. So,
which is a change, just so you
that
know.
was changed, yeah.
That they
So that might have been
failed to
one
tell
why
us
we're
about.
having problems, but so communications is a big thing. Had conversations with the Hospital Association this morning with regards to what to expect with the new legislature for the state of California. Obviously, we have a significant change to the Assembly and the Senate. It was shared with this morning that they all met for their swearing in ceremony, I guess yesterday or today. over 200 health bills were submitted on day one, 25 of which were regarding care for the homeless. We just passed the homeless care bill, which is going to have some issues for all of the hospitals statewide. And so I can only imagine what these other 25 bills are going to have on top of that. But so again, they're expecting a very wild Senate assembly up there, and there's a lot of bills put through that you know, we're just going to have to do our own to advocate the best we can. Obviously, we'll call on the board, you know, where we need their input and letters and so forth in support of that. So, but that's what's coming down the pike. And obviously, we have begun training with mandatory abuse training programs that we're doing for our employees. Those started this week. We'll continue on into next week. All of our employees need to be trained on how to deal with kinds of issues that we get confronted with. I don't know, Mark, do you want to share any more?
Well, abuse training is one thing, but then there's the Senate Bill 1299 training, which is a little bit different, and all these mandates that come down, we're on the hook for paying for these resources, not to mention the time allotted to every staff member that has to be trained in those areas. So it's a big undertaking. As you can hear next door, there's a class going on right now. We're putting together 9 classes for our staff to accommodate times and shifts, so to try to do the classes during the shift, so it's not an extra time and things like that. So you know, we're our education staff is diligently trying to make sure everybody attends. We had a very successful skills fair last week where we got greater than 90% attendance on the first 2 go around. So that was really well thought out, well put together. So
anyway, that's my report.
Are there any questions for Mr. McLean?
I have a comment. I would like to congratulate Mark and Tim for taking care of these unforeseen mandates and doing it in such a fiscally responsible way. Okay, it's not, you know, we're not having to pay overtime to get these people educated. And, you know, I know that takes some work and some thought and some effort, and I just want to express my gratitude.
I have a question, if you don't mind. Going back to the CNA and the patient to caregiver ratios. You say you have a pinning ceremony, what, next week?
tomorrow night.
Oh, tomorrow night?
Yes, sir.
Now,
7 p.m.
is this a course completion ceremony?
It is
Not
course
necessarily
completion.
a certification.
That's
What
correct.
is,
They've got
I
a
think
test
Mark
process.
probably would know the answer to, you know,
So what they
what
have
can we
to do,
anticipate as far as state certification?
the 12 individuals, I think they had 12 or 11 that successfully completed the program requirements. Now they have to go to the state level in testing, and then they have to pass that hands-on test and written test, and then they have to be certified by the state, which can take up to 4 to 8 weeks. I mean, the last class I think the last class took about 12 weeks to get their certificate.
That's why I brought it up. 'Cause
It was
I
very,
remember the last
very-
class, we were kind of going,
Yeah.
every day.
That was longer than.
You know, I was gonna dovetail a few comments if I may, because I think I'm going into my report next, but, Tim talked about us putting in an application for our own class here. Saracosa requires greater than 10 students to even run a class. They've already notified us that they're not gonna have a class in January because they don't have enough applicants. I can actually run a class with 3 or 4 people, more hours a day, and we can get some of those people through the program and graduated and basically work the program myself. So it would be much easier for us if we could get the licensing from California, Sacramento. So we're working towards that. That's gonna happen at some point, but they work in their own time frames.
We did have the licensing at one time.
We did, late in the 90s, that program went away.
97.
97, right. So it's been a while since we've done it, but I think we have the staff, we have the technology, we have the capability, we have an IT department that can manage even virtual classrooms now. So we're able to manage. Some of the requirements of the state are, you have to have a hand washing station that's meets certain standards. Bob could probably address those. Bed, linen changing stations, you have to have a certain amount of space around the bed. I mean, it's absolutely, but we have the facility to be able to offer that to students, and we've proven that. Not to mention, we've proven the curriculum and the policies and procedures, so we're just waiting for the approval.
And we utilize the same instruction.
And we're gonna use the same instructor that Saragossa does.
Right.
So there you go. Did you want me to?
But unless there's any other questions for
No,
Mr. LeBlue? Okay, thank you, Tim. Mr. Gordon?
So as far as my report is concerned, as the chief nursing officer, I am privy to some Kern County mental health resources, and Bill Walker, who's in charge of Kern County mental health services, has earmarked and not promised, but told us that we would probably be getting a sobering center up here.
Nice.
I can't answer when, I can't answer if it's us. He did say a rural community, but to be determined, but then he winked at me down at the end of the table and said, this is probably earmarked for Kern Valley. A sobering center would be a tremendous boost for some of the discharges that we have to now manage from the ER. So this goes right in line with the homeless population and things like that. So they are really kind of studying the Kern County needs assessment and things like that. So hopefully they'll hear my united voice from our community. Still entertaining options to transition away from our current LMS software, which is the Relias system. We've had some shortcomings. It doesn't meet our needs. We're trying to look for other sources. We thought we found one last month, but that CE Direct was bought up by Relias. So it kind of...
With the intent that they were gonna go ahead and use Relias' system and not the one that had better capabilities.
I just don't understand it. Anyway, we're still looking. The UR department was tasked, and that's utilization review, for those of you, some of you that don't know what that is, was tasked with finding a resource that essentially searches for swing bed availability, meaning that they're searching all of California or I think it's California, for available beds to place patients who might be waiting for a bed assignment. We've received multiple referrals, and I think Catherine might be able to answer this, but we've used Enso Care before, and they seem to be able to give us referrals. Some are a fit, some are not a fit. We have to go out and do an assessment to find out about if they're a fit for our facility. So I believe we've taken on 2 of those from that service. So we continue to look at those referrals. So that's another way to try to bolster admissions for our acute care side. Our new physician, Dr. Bailey, has been visiting the SNF residents. Some of them have real wound care needs that need to be debrided and possibly even a surgical intervention to fix some of their problems. So Dr. Bailey is available to us. He's also met with Dr. Mongar and Miranda. Has he met Dr. Gross yet?
I don't think so.
He was only here that 1 week, but he comes up once a week, addresses the concerns on the skilled nursing facility and any other concerns that might happen on med-surg. So we're excited about what he can bring to the table for wound care. He's also a plastic surgeon. So we also spoke of providing physical therapy on the weekends for post-op knees and hips. If we can start taking some of those from the Bakersfield hospitals who do those, we might be able to have physical therapy on the weekends to rehabilitate those post-op knees and hips. So we're kind of interested in doing something like that. I do have trapeze for the beds. So I've also recently kind of tasked and engaged the nursing staff to look at new ways to focus on customer satisfaction. One of the things that we're finding in our HCAHPS scores are usually and sometimes we're getting answers to some of the questions that are offered through the HCAPS system. That is the quality, I forget what the acronym is, but it deals with patient satisfaction. And some of our scores are in the middle range, but I want to get them bumped up to the always range, where if a nurse goes into a patient room, she's always asking or teaching about the medications. She's always doing those kinds of communication. And so I've got some ideas on how to improve that. One area is to do post-discharge phone calls with every discharge that goes out of the hospital. We don't have a lot of those, so it shouldn't be a hard task to achieve. I think we'll be able to get to that. Another opportunity without swaying their decision making, which is something we're not allowed to do. I can't say, here, answer every question like always. I can't do that. But I can, when they're admitted, I can start the discharge process and start really servicing that patient's needs. And hopefully that'll help bolster those numbers. If there are no questions, that's my report.
I have a question.
Sure.
Going back to the, this idea of sobering centers.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I don't know what kind of, issue, or if they issued any, but I know that you know as well as other people here, that in that type of situation would seem to me that would call for a physician at least oversight. I mean, you've got, there are a number of, as you well know, a number of substances when people are withdrawing from, they could die.
Sure. Absolutely.
Which seems to me would require a physician to at least oversee that aspect of it. I know, and now I'm not saying having a sobering center isn't a good idea. I think it could be, but it's going to have to be managed properly.
Yes, sir.
And the cost of doing that, particularly if it requires a physician, is got to be less than the benefit.
The cost will not be incurred by Kern Valley Hospital. It'll be Kern County Mental Health Services staffing and managing that facility. They only their idea is that most of their referrals will come from an emergency room after they're cleared. And so they're not gonna get a tricyclic overdose to their sobering center. It's just not gonna happen. They're gonna go to an ICU somewhere or two, once they're medically cleared by the physician and they need to sober up, they won't be put on med-surg as a very expensive admission to be sobered.
Right.
They will have the ability to go to a sobering center, see them for a short period of time, and then be discharged.
Yeah, okay.
So that's kind of how they'll manage that, and they'll be very diligent, and they'll have strict guidelines for that.
All right, I'm glad to hear that.
Okay. Anything else?
Any other questions for Mr. Gordon before we move on?
I have a question.
Yes, sir. Ma'am? Sorry.
What? I would think, I like the idea of making contact. Discharge planning should start on admission.
Absolutely it
That's
does, yes.
the regulations.
It does.
And how it should start, but, most of our area, our patients here are, elderly.
Mhm.
It's gonna be difficult for them. I mean, is there a way you could think of doing face-to-face after discharge? Because you're gonna get a lot more input, and they're gonna understand more verbally face-to-face than they are on the telephone.
And they do get education when they leave here, before they leave, but how many people are really listening upon discharge? They're ready to go home. They've been waiting for the doctor for now 2 hours or 3 or 4 hours, so they're
worried
not
about the
already,
cat.
they're trying to get home to feed their cat. They don't, and you're right. My sense is that if I can get a hold of them, we'll go over their discharge instructions the next day when they've had their cup of coffee. Telephones are a problem. Resources to get out to their house is a problem. I don't know if I can achieve that. We could certainly entertain it, yeah?
At some point, the goal would be to use case managers
Yeah, because
here. I mean, we're just starting to do that through the Prime project, and I think we've seen some great results with that.
Right.
Absolutely.
But, again,
because
it's,
then that appointment could be set on discharge.
They're gonna expect you, just like
Absolutely.
when we used to do home health, that appointment was set before they left, they knew that person was.
Well, Robin's pretty good at arranging for resources that are
Right.
available, and but now getting those people to
But they
those
don't always show
resources,
up,
that's
right.
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 That's what we wanna make the phone call about and get them plugged into that. So you're right, tying off those loose ends is a big challenge,
And then your
not just
customer
in our
survey
community.
will go up. Like, when
Awesome.
you start doing those, I think the customer satisfactions are gonna go,
I think you're
they're
right.
gonna increase. Cause not everybody has an advocate.
Right.
They live alone, and without that personal advocate making sure, I mean,
Sure.
it's-
Well, that's the
It's a
issue we
big
have too,
deal.
you know, patients get discharged obviously on prescriptions, and if they don't have a way to get to the pharmacy afterwards, then they don't get on the medications that they need.
Right.
And, you know, then they're end up back in our ER again, and so forth, and that's not what we wanna see happen.
I suspect that recidivism is a real problem with some of the reasons that you're talking about. They just can't get to the pharmacy, they
Right.
can't get those follow-up appointments. So I suspect that in some of those bills that were presented, those 200 bills, that's gonna be the hospital's responsibility also, to come up with some way to ensure that that outpatient is getting the services they need.
Right.
Without funding. So we're gonna, Chet's really creative at taking care of funding, which he's up next for his report, so I'll, unless there's other questions. Oh, and by the way, I did wanna mention that I probably, unless it's gonna be directed some other way, I'm gonna probably be given a written report for your packet and not doing a verbal report unless you really want me to do something. I can bring my guitar up and play some music or something, but I think that it will help them.
we don't wanna go that far.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Item 6 is the Chief Financial Officer report, Mr. Beal.
I'm gonna talk finance with you here for just a minute, but before I do, what I would like to do is inform or remind everyone, and I'm gonna tag on to what Mark just said, and that is that the board has felt it important enough that we have a standing finance committee meeting where there is a packet up to approximately 50 pages of detailed financial information that we go through. And I think it would be less than positive for everyone if we were to do that again at this meeting. So what you're gonna get from me at this meeting is a summary. You get most of the detailed financial in the packet, not all, but it's a situation where only the summary items, unless there is a question, are going to be touched. And as well, I actually do a narrative variance analysis of the difference between actual and budget or trends that are seen, that actually is a part of the packet at the same time for both finance and is included in the board packet. And that can be easily read by anyone, I believe, who attends the meeting here. And so I just want you to be aware, if you're not aware, and it's a situation also for those that are aware, a reminder that we do have a meeting for that. It is an open meeting. You're certainly welcome to come. It's the last Wednesday of every month for the board meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning. Now, let's go through a few items from the finance from the month of October and fiscal year to date through that particular month. And I'd like to actually also follow Mark with some of the things that I talk about here. And let's talk about the medical surgical unit first. We continue to see a trend in the medical surgical unit of reduced volume. That's true of both acute and swing patients. The acute patients, because it was never very high for the most part, at least in the last 4 or 5 years, and I just provided, we have to actually post by mandate of the Security and Exchange Commission for someone having bond indebtedness, the way we do with our revenue bonds. I just sent him a showing where you can year to year, looking at all these things, how it has trended down from year to year, and that is actually posted on the Securities and Exchange website called EMMA, If anyone wants to get into that and look at it, it is there as mandated for us, for our revenue bonds. But it continues to decline. The decline in this particular fiscal year has been larger than it has been in prior years, simply because our swing bed volume has declined dramatically. Whereas the acute side has its ups and downs and still has its ups and downs, mostly downs, but the swing beds have dramatically dropped off this particular year. And that's why Mark's talking about physical therapy on the weekends. That's why we're talking about agencies that can, we can take a look at on the SNF side, and I'll get to that in a minute. But basically, the whole idea for swing beds is to do more therapeutic services. Rehab therapy orthopedically and pulmonary rehab as well. And that's something that we need to do more work on with our Bakersfield hospitals, and that's being looked at. In the area of long-term care, we also have had a larger drop-off this particular fiscal year than we've had in a number of years. Some of that is related to what Mark talked about with the CNA availability, but a whole lot of it's also related to intake. We had an extensive amount of time where we were not doing intake the way we should. The intake has picked up, the services they talked about outside, but so have the deaths picked up. So we're not really gaining anything at this point in time, even though the number of referrals and the intake work has picked up. One of the things that sustained us in the early part of this fiscal year was our emergency room, and it had been increasing. That dropped off a month or so ago and continues to drop off. Okay, our emergency room volume is substantially down the last 2 months as well. Okay, so we have work to do emergency room wise. I mean, we're not going to go out and create emergencies, but certainly on admission of the patients to the acute side, we have substantial work to do with our hospitalist group and especially our ER group. That remains to be done. We have some referred outpatient services, and when I say referred outpatient services, that means patients that are referred either from our clinic or from Clinic Sierra Vista, or can be individual physicians' offices for outpatient ancillary services that they need, meaning imaging and or echoes otherwise. We did add echoes, we had more time in echoes, we had more time in ultrasound, even though we didn't have volume. Those particular services are beginning to build. Clinic Sierra Vista got rid of their radiography because it was not digital. So we are the only radiography outside of Bakersfield and Ridgecrest. When I mean that, I mean digital, okay? Digital radiography. And so consequently, the volume there has stayed up, even though our ER is down, even though our inpatient is down, the referred outpatients have stayed up. As a part of that, they stayed up simply because the volume in the clinic has pretty much stayed up. Obviously, we did add another primary care physician in the middle of July. That's helped. The end of the construction over there and having a new building has helped, but that's keeping us alive to some degree by maintaining what we're doing. That is our largest volume builder. It's extremely important that we continue to work through that particular product line to keep that volume up. Going on, and that's by the way, that's in the specialty services as well, that pretty much come through telemedicine. Medicare is actually, they've got new laws coming out as of the 1st of January related to telemedicine. more and more things are going to be paid for that were not. More and more things are going to be included in the availability for telemedicine. More and more actually add-ons for telemedicine. They are now recognizing that that is the state of the art to do things electronically, digitally, telemedicine-wise, and we need to be on board with those things as we go forward. Our surgery. We had been seeing a drop-off in our surgeries. We know that I'm not talking about endoscopies now, I'm talking about surgeries, okay? We had seen it come up, we'd seen it kind of come down the start of this year. We've now seen, for example, in the month of October, the surgeries themselves were as same as they were for the month last fiscal year. I'm not going to say how many that is. It's still not enough, but we certainly appreciate the fact when we get surgeries from Dr. Montes and from Dr. Buxton, and we've seen a few more surgeries actually from Dr. Spahn as well. So, I mean, that's one area where the community put an awful lot of money into those surgeries, and we need to continue to try to take advantage of it. I can tell you that most of the critical access hospitals in the state of California do not have any surgeries at all, or very few. And I'm talking about surgeries, not endoscopies, okay? And our endoscopies are down as well, and have been for the last 6 months, simply because we had one gastroenterologist that used to visit us every other week, and only visits us every one time a month. There are two that come, and they rotate. And Dr. Bike has always been coming for years, okay, every other week. In the past, some years ago, it was Dr. Vogel that came on the off weeks. It became Dr. Matute, and he now has decided 6 or 8 months ago that he was only going to come one Tuesday a month, and that has significantly impacted our endoscopies. We pick up a few by pushing them on the next week or pushing them on the next time that particular gastroenterologist comes, but that is the second most prevalent transfer from the ER. It's GI work, gastroenterology. Second only to cardiology. Okay? So we do have some cardiologists coming into the community, both in our clinic on a weekly basis, as well as BFMC, but it's not enough because they don't do any hospital work. They will read echoes, and the echoes are up. But basically, we need the availability of cardiology when we need it, which isn't just to be once a month or twice a month or once a week for the patients that are coming through for follow-up. The retail pharmacy. Some of you experienced the retail pharmacy changes. I think they're positive. I think the managing pharmacist down there is younger, more forward thinking. Not because he's younger, it's simply because he is more forward thinking and has the thought process of again, electronics in his head. So that's why you can now get your refills off your cell phone, okay? Things that the larger pharmacies, chains do, we're trying to do. They still haven't brought back enough of our total lost patient volume, but it's a beginning. It's a beginning. And the one thing that is much, much, much better is the management of drugs sold to patients, the cost of that versus the charges for that. You must be on top of how you're changing your charges every single day, because the pharmaceutical companies change their prices every single day. And if you're not there, up until our latest pharmacy manager came, we were selling some of those drugs at less than cost. Okay? Because they weren't updated quickly enough. That's not happening anymore. And we actually, for the first time in 3 years, in the month of October, saw on a product line basis, fully allocated, meaning allocated overhead, which we look at actually in the finance committee, made money in the pharmacy. First time in 3 years. Enough about that.
Kay had a question for you real quick.
Real quick, before you go on to the next page, what would you suggest that we do in order to raise the volume in the ER?
Raise the volume in the ER?
How would we do that?
Well, you probably, the biggest way to do that, no, good question, okay? As I said, we can't go out and create emergencies.
Right.
But what we can do is we could make our emergency room more patient friendly. What does that mean? That means how we greet and take care of patients, but it also means the physical plant. And that's one of the reasons we were trying to put that into our plan. Now, has that been scrapped? To some degree, yes. Because we now know that the community, after 3 times, the community doesn't want to participate. That doesn't mean we're going to stop. It means we're going to readjust and look at what we can do to make it more patient friendly. And I don't know of anything else. Tim?
Yeah, no, again, physical plan obviously is a big piece of that, and it's, we've talked about there's some issues associated maybe with pricing and co-pays, but a lot of the co-pays are established by the health plans. We can't control that. We've talked about urgent care and so forth, and like I said, it's difficult because if you create an urgent care center separate from the ER, you're now pulling volume out of the ER, because both of those have to be staffed, because you've got to maintain minimal staffing here, you've got duplication of equipment. There's just a lot of reasons why that doesn't work. So we've got some strategies that we're looking at that we hope will provide more space, more individual treatment areas. We just met with the architects yesterday, trying to look and see what we may be able to do on our own. And so in terms of moving us towards some kind of seismic compliance issues and so forth, but we're not at a point yet where we're ready to.
Small communities with rural hospitals don't use urgent care. Right. They use fast track.
Right.
Okay? Our physical plant and our volume does not lend well to fast track. But that's one of the things we will be looking at.
Absolutely.
Well, I'd like to also point out that improved facilities will definitely improve patient experience and patient satisfaction. But there's another aspect of it as well, and that is provider recruitment. These professionals want to work in state-of-the-art, the best facilities they can. That would certainly improve our ability to attract providers.
We've really worked pretty hard on provider recruitment. We use a lot of locum tenens, which is not only expensive, but you have physicians who are moving on. They're just there to cover a shift, and that's all. And we actually have not used now, probably for 4 or 5 months, any locum tenens. It's all individual physician contracted. And they're physicians who are working there other than just that shift. And it's important to get there. Not only patients get used to them, but the physicians themselves care more about it. It's the same reason that you really don't want to staff your nursing staff or any other employee staff with registry. Because if they're not going to live and be a part of that organization, they don't really care. They haven't developed a rapport with the physicians. They haven't developed a need themselves to be a part of it. So what you want to get to, for the most part, is physicians and employees who live and work in your community. Now, they may not totally live there all the time, but at least they can come from Ridgecrest or they can come from Bakersfield, and they pull shifts all the time.
They become stable.
Yes. And that's true of all of your small hospitals that are outside. I mean, they want the same kind of thing. Not going to get in real heavy into the dollars. We are doing well with our cash flow, simply because even though we have deficiencies in our volume, patient care volume, we have made tremendous strides in our grants and our money that's non-patient related. I shouldn't say non-patient related, non-patient revenue related. What that means is it's supplemental money coming over and above because of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and how it's been interpreted by the state of California. It is a tremendous difference to us, to the tune, truthfully, of about $3 million a year. Substantial amount. Should that go away, we would be in a world of hurt the way we used to be before that. But that is keeping us going very well.
I'd like to recognize a person in the room that is very, very successful in her role as meeting all of the grant requirements from the Prime Project, and she's over in the corner over there. Lisa Wiley.
Let me just talk a little bit about that. The Prime Project was put into place, okay, through a grant process. We wrote a grant. Matter of fact, Ma wrote the grant simply because I wanted anybody else to do it. But the situation is, it was based upon, our particular grant was based upon dual diagnosis, physical and behavioral medicine integration. Okay? A lot of the small hospitals use that for their Prime Project. And what that basically means, and you have to meet metrics, okay, which means measurable results on a quarterly basis, that you've actually set up your goals and objectives in matrix. And once if you make points to that, it's worth $750,000 a year for 5 years. And Lisa has been keeping track of all those metrics and submitting the reports of those metrics into the program at the state of California, and we have not missed. The only one we missed in the second quarter of the program a couple of years ago was because we said the clinic construction was going to be done in advance of our timing in our particular goals and objectives. And because it wasn't done on the day we say it was going to be done, we missed 1 quarter's payment. But otherwise, every single payment, every single year, every single quarter, or every other quarter has been basically, we've gotten our money. And we just got another $750,000 in November. Okay. In November. So, you're absolutely right, Mark. Thank you, Lisa.
What's your cut?
Thank you.
So our cash flow is doing well. And if I set some of that money aside, then I'm getting, you stinking rights I have. Because we were facing $7 million being raised for the construction. And now we're facing raising it all ourselves. Okay? And if I didn't set that money aside a little bit, we wouldn't have anything for our construction. You betcha. That's proper cash management. Unless there are questions, that's my report.
Questions for Mr. Beal?
Yeah, I've got a couple questions here. You just mentioned the cash flow, and it's, our board can turn to page 22. My question is, on the bottom line, our net cash balance is all in negative for the rest of this entire fiscal year.
Yes, it is.
And our days cash on hand goes from minus 4.84 days cash on hand the whole way into 26.77 days negative cash on hand, 41.5
As I have
onward.
As have I have explained numerous times, the reason it's shown that way is because this is just operating cash. I just said that I had set aside cash for construction. That does not include any of that cash that's set aside. It's for operations, okay? And I wanted to show a negative. There's 2 reasons I wanted to show a negative. Number 1, I want to make sure everybody understands that we're gonna pay cash, even using the float to keep our vendors current.
Oh, good.
That's how current those vendors are. I'm using float money, okay, from operations. You understand what that means? And money that is still, we've issued checks for because they just haven't cleared the bank. Okay? The second reason is that in our agreements with the state of California, Cal Mortgage, who guarantees our loans, our revenue bonds, and has actually given us a debt relief amount of $6 million that we have to pay later. We deferred that, okay, as an agreement with him. If, for example, right now, not having the bond go through, not having the tax go through, if they saw money there, according to the agreement with them, they could take it. I prevailed upon them to set aside money for construction, but if they thought I had that money on the bottom of there in operations, it would be totally gone, because the money that they advanced us for the debt relief, they would use it for that instead of having it come after 2021. Proper cash flow, smart using your cash, and not just throwing it out there so that it's not really managed. Okay? I will leave it at that, unless there are questions.
Okay, one more question about the finance committee. As long as I've served on this board, the finance committee is open to the public, yes. But even if it's only 2 board members on the finance committee, which means that if any of the other 3 board members want to attend the finance committee, they're perfectly welcome, but they cannot say a word.
One has to be
That's a Brown Act, that's the way it should be, and that's the way all boards function.
Right.
Not at a full board.
Right.
They do it at a committee.
What that tells me is that the decisions that are made in the finance committee are not reflective of the full board.
Doesn't say that to me. I work with all my hospitals that way and have forever for 25 or 30 years. And what happens is they don't make the decisions. What they do is make recommendations to the board. And the full board makes that determination. So I will tell you, you're the first board member in any hospital I've ever worked in, critical access, or just any district hospital, that is concerned about the committee doing the work.
Well, I'm not saying the committee should do the work. I'm saying that
Well,
it
that's
should
a
take more than,
standard board procedure. I'm going to leave that to the board. It's not up to me. Any other questions?
maybe each board member should get a copy of the finance packet rather than having to ask.
You have the majority of the finance packet in your packet. And they
It's
have,
on
it-
No,
they have the
no.
ability to get the
It's an
full
agenda.
finance packet
Well, it's
anytime
on the
they want.
agenda.
Okay, one at a time, please. Scott, you
Okay,
went
I'm
ahead
sorry,
quick for
Scott.
clarification for Director Knight.
Finance committee is posted on the website, correct? It's available to anyone who wants to see it, board member or public,
That's the full package.
the full packet.
It's a full packet, yes,
Yes.
but there's no discussion. I mean, I can look at it on the website,
Yes, so
see
Well,
what I
again,
see, but
if
No,
directors have
nothing
questions
about
about what they read on the website, then they can bring it to a board meeting and ask Chet or the committee members whatever questions they have. That's correct.
Which you've
Okay.
done, I mean, you've
Yeah.
been bringing questions for a long, long time.
right,
And I think the important part, if I may, is the Chair of the Finance, Chet's point about, we do not in Finance Committee make any firm decisions.
Well,
We can make
no,
recommendations that have to
yeah.
come before the full board for approval. We, don't have that power, don't need that power, and it's just, to inform if each of us served on every committee that needed to be served on, to be running ourselves, ragged.
It's too much work.
Yeah, it's too much work,
I
but,
understand.
any decisions that are made are done through the entire board.
Well, thank you for your information, however, when I look at the consent agenda, all this has been discussed at finance,
Get-
but it really doesn't say anything. So you would really have to attend the finance committee in order to get the true,
Well, you'd have long drawn out minutes, Kay,
Right.
but the recommendations that they discuss in finance is in the packet. Each board member reviews it before coming to this meeting.
Right.
for approval.
you know, you're right.
I mean, that's just how the Brown Act is, I mean, it's,
And there's, again, the board members have the opportunity of calling finance, calling me, or whatever, if they've got questions about that before it goes to committee. So, I mean, there's lots of ways to get questions answered, you know, so, I mean, I appreciate your comments and so forth, and so forth, but unfortunately, that's the regulations we have to work with here in California, so.
Scott,
It's
can I ask
not
you a
ideal by
question?
any stretch. Yes?
We've been sworn in. Do we have 7 board members tonight
No.
at this meeting?
No.
So the newly elected board members do not take office by law until Friday.
Are there any further questions for Mr. Beadle before we move on? Just one quick question, Chet.
Sure.
You said the telemedicine that's gonna be reimbursed by Medicare starting in January?
January 1, what they've done is actually modified some of the CMS regulations to allow more of the E&M, what they call E&M codes for telemedicine, and the modifiers to be paid, where in the past they were not. So what they're doing is they're expanding more and more the recognition for telemedicine. As a matter of fact, let's just take, I'll give you an example. Let's say we have a visit by a psychiatrist in person in the clinic. Okay? In person, face to face. We actually bill, it's a bundled bill for the clinic. It includes the professional component, which is the physician's charge. It includes the technical component, which is the facility and staff charge. And then there are some supplies included, some supplies wouldn't be included. And most procedures really come to the hospital for the ancillary services. Okay, there's a certain amount that Medicare pays for that, and it's our allowable cost. Right now, the allowable cost subsequent to the first quarter, I believe, was $143 and a change. That's with overhead allocation. It has been more than that at times. It depends on the volume because it's divided by the number of Medicare or total visits, because the cost goes with the visits. But for something done through telemedicine, we actually get a rider. We put a 20 modifier on there, and we get $20 more from Medicare simply because it's done on telemedicine. Even more than it would be face-to-face, one-on-one, in person with the physician. That's just an example.
Okay. So from a financial standpoint, you're gonna improve the bottom line over time, or any indication?
We certainly hope so. There is no question that some equivalency between behavioral health and physical health has to happen. And actually what the Affordable Care Act says, in a nutshell, is that you have to treat behavioral health in the same way that you do physical health. Okay? So that you're paying for that on the same kind of basis. Now here in California, because most of these patients truthfully are Medi-Cal, back before the early 90s, if I had, like when I worked for CPC, which was community psychiatric centers out of Laguna Niguel, we actually knew in our hospitals that we would have approximately 10 days of coverage from Medi-Cal. That was before danger to self, danger to others, 3-day plan. Okay? 3-day length of stay. It was costing the state, they felt, too much to treat the patient. So they went to a 3-day mandatory kind of thing so that the cost would go down. And it's been that way up until the Affordable Care Act. Now with the Affordable Care Act, they're having to rethink it a little bit. They don't like it, because they're trying to get their budgets done, their appropriations, and their encumbrances, as in government accounting, okay? But it's going to happen, and it's going to expand a little bit, and that's why we're seeing what we're seeing.
Okay. Thank you, Chad.
Thank you, Jeff.
And just one last thing, the finance committee is gonna be canceled this month, or postponed, I should say.
We had,
Because it's during the
we had
Christmas.
discussed,
This 26th.
if you have no objections, guys,
I don't, the only thing it's gonna do, basically, Charlie, is it's gonna, bring the audit. The audit is ready, basically, and I usually do the audit to the finance committee first, but it will just be the auditor in January at the board meeting presenting to the board. When you hear the audit, I don't think you'll mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's a good one.
that's fine. Yeah. That's satisfactory to me. Heidi and I discussed it, and I have absolutely no issue with that.
Thank you. We have no old business, so we'll move into new business. Item number 1 is the Tehachapi trailer sublease. Tim, you wanna talk about
I'll
that?
start this off and I'll defer to Bob and Chet. We had, as part of our strategy when we were looking at our seismic upgrade, the need for utilizing the space within the hospital much better. Our plan ultimately was to lease these 2 trailers. These are trailers that have been utilized by Tehachapi Hospital
For 10 years.
For 10 years, while they've been waiting for their hospital to be built, and it's taken them that long. And so they're in actually great shape, and so the idea here was that we would bring those here. By doing so, we're actually subleasing these trailers directly from Tehachapi Healthcare District, who holds that lease. We literally save about 50% of the cost if we were to go out to the same company and lease those same exact trailers. And so it was a great opportunity for us to save literally half the lease costs for providing the services. The plan ultimately would be, and it was when we were doing our plan, was to begin moving some of our non-patient care departments out into that space, free up space within the hospital, so that we can begin working on projects that will provide us more space in our clinical departments, and hopefully allow us, as we talked before, that we're working on a discussion right now with our architect about the possibility of maybe creating a new emergency room, utilizing all of the space back there on both sides, and moving our patients all the way around and a horseshoe design back there, and then funding that ourselves instead of waiting for the community to do that. As we've said before, and we have for the last several years, the emergency room is our single biggest problem that we have. It's our port of entry for virtually all of our patients that come in that are not clinic-based. And so, again, it's been an issue we've had associated with overcrowding in there. We have issues with HIPAA compliance, for privacy. You've got code going on with 3 other patients literally within 6 feet of each other. It's not conducive to good patient care and hasn't been. So this provides us an opportunity to hopefully continue to move our project along towards seismic compliance without having to rely on the community to do that. And so again, there's a strong desire on our part, and we believe there's an opportunity to do this. We're still investigating that. We're early on. We have asked our architect to reach out to Oshpod to begin having some initial conversation about that possibility. And just the difficulties that we've had, obviously, in getting community support for the project. And again, there's a whole host of conversations going right now in Sacramento as it relates to the requirements of SB 1953. The RAND Corporation has been engaged by hospital associations to go back and reprice the total cost statewide of all of the hospitals having to come into compliance. Was done about 9 years ago, and they had a fee of about $110 billion to make that happen. What we found out was that fee did not include any financing. It was only the cost of construction. They're repricing that out right now based upon current building costs and those kinds of things, and it's expected that will top out at over $440 billion for the state of California. Most of our legislature that are here today were not in the legislature 24 years ago when that law was first passed. And, you know, we've proposed, I mean, from our hospital has proposed certain alternatives to spending that kind of money in bricks and mortar in facilities, and recognize that's what the law calls for. But, you know, we look at it from the perspective that our hospital, like most rural hospitals, are here primarily providing primary care. You know, we have a 25-bed hospital, which is, most of them don't even have 25 beds. You know, we have our certain outpatients. We've got a very small 7-bay emergency room back there. If we have a major disaster in this valley, where do you think those patients are going to be cared for? You can't fit them in the emergency room. No matter how many more beds we add in there, guess what? They're going to be on the front lawn. They're going to be out in the parking lot. They're going to be parked across the street. And so the issue that we've proposed to them is why not, especially in these rural hospitals, instead of putting so much money in the buildings, put them into either some kind of a mobile system that can be brought into a community by helicopter in the event of a major disaster. There's a lot of things that can be done. That's picking up a lot of traction in Sacramento right now. There's conversations being held with key members of the legislature to kind of talk through that. You know, clearly what we need to make sure is that the hospitals that we have to transfer patients to who need extensive surgery, that those facilities are available and accessible to us. And obviously those would be the Bakersfield hospitals, our trauma center at Kern Medical. Those must be available to any of the rural hospitals for referral. So, you know, again, we likened it to, and kind of Mark's analogy of a MASH unit, you know, during the war. You know, the first wounded was brought to that local hospital. It was put right there behind the lines. And obviously you treated what you could treat, and those that you can't were sent to the back, to the specialty hospitals, and that's where they were taken care of. It's the same principle today. And that can be done for considerably less money than we have to put into bricks and mortar. And a good example of that really was, you take a look at the fires that we just had up in Paradise. You know, they could have spent $30 million to build that hospital and get it all earthquake proof. Well, guess what? They had a major fire there that basically shut that hospital down, for lots of reasons. You know, and just as we heard yesterday that there's now a new code coming out that's now going to require the exterior of buildings that are in high fire zones, that they're going to have to be fire resistant outside the building and on the roofs. So new regulations being crafted. So, you know, we're forcing the issues and literally talking to everybody that we can get in front of to really open their eyes and saying, this just doesn't make sense in these communities. I mean, like I said, no matter what, we still have to spend money to get our ER up to speed so that we can provide optimal care there. I mean, that's important. And so I believe that, you know, again, our plan at this point in time to go ahead and move forward with these trailers to allow us to begin moving in that direction also continues to show effort that the project is still ongoing. We're hoping to be able to have some conversations very shortly with USDA. In the event that we do need to go back for some funding, it might be considerably less, and we obviously want to keep them interested in what we're doing here.
Just so you understand, because I actually used to have an office in these buildings over at Tehachapi. Basically, you got two double-wide trailers, and they fit kind of in an L shape. Housed there, for example, you can house administration and have a separate area for the administrative assistant. It had human resources, it had medical records, it had the business office, it had all of accounting, all fit into those trailers, just to give you kind of an idea, okay? And we're talking $2,000 a month rent for the whole schmear. Awnings, walkways, the whole dog. Yes, we have to fix the parking lot, put them on, but man, what a deal.
And we actually needed to do the parking lot over there anyway. Again, our staff have been parking in dirt for years, and when it rains, it's a mud pit, you know. So, I mean, there's certain things that would be beneficial for us that are not considerable sums of money in the long run. And so I think there are investments in our property. We own a lot there. Again, it was going to be a part of our solution long term anyway. So again, my recommendation to the board is that we go ahead and approve this, to move this forward so that we can keep this effort going.
Dave?
I'd like to make a comment if I can.
Oh, hold on a second, Mr. Parks, we'll go with Dave and we'll come back to you.
Okay, I think that, all of us here on this dais, have realized how important keeping this hospital open is. Indeed, we tried unsuccessfully twice to pass a bond to make this happen. I think it's, a mistake for us to let that discourage us. Okay, this has to happen. This hospital's gotta stay open. I think that if we can take any action, such as this, to keep our momentum going forward, okay, I think that that's immeasurably valuable. So I would urge my fellow board members to support this.
I'd like to reach out for Bob, I'll see if he comes in with me.
Yeah, I just have a couple of comments, because, shortly after Major Q, Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development reached out to me. We had a conversation about the bill not passing. And the very first question that they put to me, is there any way that the hospital could proceed in small increments and pieces versus the whole thing at one time? And so after discussions with Chet and Mark and Tim, I sent them an email that says, yes, we are going to move ahead, if at all possible, with board approval, in small increments. And our biggest challenge, as we all know, is very limited funds. And I would love to put a nice new little building over there, inexpensive type of construction, but that's a substantial outlay of money as compared to utilizing these trailers that don't require a large outlay of cash out front. What we're looking at just tonight is the cost to relocate those trailers to this site. That includes not only the disassembly at that site, but the transport to over here, placing them temporarily at one end of the lot while we prepare the footings and foundations for them to be placed on, and then for the company to come back and then place them onto the foundations, put down the tie downs and everything that's required. So what we're looking at tonight is just that initial cost of getting them here, but that does include the setting of them in the future. Obviously, it'll come to the board at another time when we get the costs together to improve the lot as far as the foundation footings and a small parking lot that will cover those, the parking spaces required for those two buildings. So, yeah.
We're gonna need septic.
Yes, septic and various things, yes.
Mr. Parks, you have it.
Okay. The inexpensive building you're talking about, did you look at the cost of putting one up above the building?
We had a discussion with the architect. He's done several of those.
Okay.
Yes.
They would be compliant with the new rules. Those things will be junk because they won't be compliant. They're wood
Compliant
sides.
with what, though?
They don't have to be
They don't have to.
compliant. What Tim just said.
They don't have to
The
be.
fire
They're
codes,
fine.
the fire codes in the future. You just said so. You're
We're
gonna
talking
need
about
fire
seismic
resist-
code, not fire code.
No, seismic.
What's not in here, to Kay's point, is the $14,000 that you want to move those up here. $124,000 to make mobiles permanent. And the cost, and you're restricted to what you can use them for. If you put a good sized Butler building on there that can be changed and maneuvered around to do whatever you wanna do with it. This, you need more research into what you're doing. It's a little bit, foolish, and in your opinion. Yes, my
Are
opinion
you calling
is
us
foolish.
foolish? Are you standing at that podium calling us all foolish?
No, I'm.
Yes, you
saying
are. You
you've
just
gotta put
did.
more research into it.
Mr. Chair,
So,
I think we should table this until we get more, about the benefits of having one building that could be, changed as our needs change. To have those things sit on there permanent, just,
Well, we're talking about a permanent, we're not talking.
oh yeah, $124,000.
Well, most of that's to put the parking spaces in and put some asphalt over there and so forth, and
The
if proper drainage,
foundations and
which we'd have to
bathrooms.
do anyway if we put another building in it.
Foundations and
Most of that cost would
we
be.
should look at the alternatives, we should look at what could be done, as opposed to getting ourselves into, if we decide to contract, to cancel it within 180 days, whatever.
These again, Gene, are things that the board considered some time ago, because this was all built into our plan to get the tax measured for the hospital. This was the plans to
But
do
we're
that.
not, we're not doing this.
And effectively approved by Oshkosh.
Correct.
Director Bush, you have a-
I just wanted to say, Gene, that it's, I have full confidence, in many discussions that we've had regarding this very issue, in Bob and Tim and Chet and everybody, that this is the most efficient, cost-effective way to go. We have an opportunity here.
What's the alternative?
To get
You
these-
haven't brought up any alternatives.
Well, we looked at alternatives and they're not cost-effective. To put up a permanent site over there, building, we have an opportunity to sublease some appropriate, it's nothing fancy, far from that, but to appropriate and at half the cost of what it would cost us to go out and do it new. We're taking advantage of that, so that we can clear space and then piece by piece, make the improvements on this side.
Since we're not doing the construction that we were, is the need really there for that much space?
Yes.
Can you use?
If we're
Yes.
going to put the ER in this wing, we've got to clear that wing out.
We've got to get
We've
them
got
out
to
of
get them
there,
out.
over there.
It's
And
gotta
this
be-
is the most cost-effective way.
It's got to be gutted.
We've looked at all
And what are
kinds
you
of
going to do with
alternatives.
administration and all the administrative services? You got to put them somewhere.
You could buy a 3,000 square foot building, which is what that is, for $150,000 right down the street.
But that doesn't meet the needs, there's not enough space in there to do that.
3,000 square feet, you're talking about 3,000 square feet.
My point is, we need it here on campus, right where across, because our people are having to walk
And
back and forth to
made
the hospital.
offices already done,
Yeah,
even some furniture already
furniture's
done.
already in them, right.
Yeah, we're kind of keeping our
the
fingers
issue
crossed
is,
at this point, the furniture's coming
Gene,
with it.
this hopefully won't be a permanent solution. The bottom line is this is an opportunity for us to get these in here.
That's putting a lot of money into something that's.
Well, it's not really, because the bottom line is the work that's gonna be done for the site prep will be used regardless of what we put over there. You still have
But
drainage
everything's
issues that have to be
built around
addressed.
the buildings, all the parking's built around the buildings.
These trailers, if we decide later on that they don't meet our needs, we can terminate the lease, and we can walk away from them, and then put a building up. But right now, it gets us started without having to spend a considerable outlay of cash to build a building. And a Butler building is nothing but an exterior frame, you still have
With
to.
metal, what you just mentioned, is gonna have to be fire resistant.
No.
That is fire resistant.
It's not,
No.
it does not need to be.
Because the hospital, they're
The
saying
hospital
that
does.
legislature is beginning work on maybe another mandate saying that hospitals have to have fire retardant out, you know.
Exteriors
Exterior-
on the acute
exteriors.
care hospital.
But again, there's a big difference between ancillary services and patient care services. You know, we don't have to adhere with these buildings that we're talking about to those kinds of things. That's not even an issue as yet. But we don't have to meet seismic requirements. We don't have to have hand wash sinks in a certain area in a certain size because it's not a patient care facility. And this is
It's just that we don't
yes.
know what we're gonna be doing, what we're gonna be doing.
Well,
We
this
haven't
is a-
decided yet, the community hasn't decided yet. They're the ones that's gonna make up their mind what we do.
They decided that
And-
they didn't
and
want
we're-
to sponsor
Yeah,
a
they
parcel
say, yeah,
tax,
so what are we gonna do? They're gonna decide what we're gonna do.
this is what,
And so, we should put that off.
we're
until
not
they
asking them
decide.
for a dime. We're not
Right.
asking anybody for a dime. I don't know why you're upset about it because
I'm not upset about it.
we're doing this on our own dime. Look what we did, look what, Greg and
That's their
everybody
money,
did
that
and
hundred
Bob
and
did.
twenty-four thousand, that 14,000, it's their money, it's not our money, it's a community hospital.
Yes, it's a community hospital, but the tax dollars are not paying for it. We're paying for it out of operations. We're a not-for-profit facility, certainly, but we're a critical access hospital, and if we have the cash flow to be able to do this, and I have full confidence in our administrative staff to steer me in the right direction, I will take their recommendations, because they know a lot more about some things than I do.
They need to look into more before they make a recommendation.
All right, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parks.
Okay.
You had a question, Mr. Dees?
Yeah.
Or a comment?
I agree, we don't really know the information, we don't know. I'm not saying it's a bad idea because I don't know. And I don't know how to make an informed decision if I don't have all the information. So we don't know what it's gonna cost to get them here.
Yes,
We
we
don't know
do.
what's gonna cost.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, we do.
Well, what's it gonna cost?
Attendance at meetings, it would provide you with the information that you require. I don't recall ever seeing you at a building and construction meeting, even though we've been having them for months. And that's in that time, that's where we've gone over all this stuff. We did consider a Butler building for a while, and we decided that wasn't the right way to go. It wasn't financially the right way to go. If people, it seems like, well, okay, when I first started on this board 8 years ago, I recognized I had a steep learning curve. I embarked upon that, my education with zeal. Okay, I've been a big proponent of board education, because if we're gonna make informed decisions here, we need to be informed.
So how much is it gonna cost?
Yeah.
Mr. Easterday had a,
I would like to address it. If we were to put in a Butler building, and let's just say that we could do that for $145 a square foot, 3,000 square foot, that's $435,000, not including the site work, okay? So, the cost to move these trailers here is $12,803.84.
12.8. We can
What,
throw-
12?
Yeah, we can throw
12,803.
Larry at it. Okay.
All right.
How about the setup, the footings, the electrical, you know, people wanna know.
And as soon as we have those costs, they will come to this committee, they will be discussed, and they will be approved. If, for instance, let's just say we decided it's too much money, we need to go a different route, we simply cancel the contract on the trailers, they come and pick them up, and we are out $12,000.
Is there an urgency on getting these figured?
Yes, there is. City of Hatchby says they have to be out by the end of December. And if they go back to the yard in Bakersfield, then we have to release them at a cost of double the cost,
What's the square footage?
about 3,000.
Rent's 2,000.
Yes.
Excellent.
We do know the cost, don't we? The footings and everything, 125,000.
No, we do not have the cost of any of that yet, because we haven't hired the architect to develop the plans, to submit them to the county of Kern Building Department. So until we have, so where we're at right now, because the trailers need to leave to Hatchby, there is a need to bring them here. Now, at that point, if the board approves, right now I'm waiting for a cost from the architect to develop the site. Okay, the parking lot and the footings. As soon as he gives us that cost, and he will probably give us an estimated cost of construction based upon the design, he has to work with the county of Kern, but those costs will then come here for a meeting to be discussed. And if it's thought that it's too expensive or there's a better way to go, then we can do so.
Some of those costs have to be done anyway, am I not incorrect? But
Right, absolutely.
pretty much the majority of them.
Yes, if we place, like I said, if we put a Butler building on there for, 400 and some odd thousand, we still have that additional site work of parking lots, lighting, plantings, curbs, gutters, all of that.
How soon will we be able to use the trailers? How long will all that take?
County of Kern's pretty good at turning plans around as compared to the state of California, so I would hope that we would have something approved. If all these steps fall in place, we would probably take us 6 months to be ready for construction. I mean, there's steps we gotta approve, every.
It took
every
us a year to
piece.
get ready for the clinic,
Yes,
just
for
to
the clinic.
use that as a guideline.
At
So
the
all
end.
this time, we'd be paying rent on something we're using.
That is true, yes.
Not a bad idea, but
Well, my opinion is that for a few short months, it's still, even with that addition, if we can get it done within half a year, that's a small price to pay compared to what it would cost to go another route. It might inflate the cost of this proposal, a bit more, but it still keeps it well, below what alternatives would be, so.
And within some.
To take advantage of the opportunity that we have to get these, that, you know,
And I have one little tiny piece.
Yep.
And that little piece, and that little piece says that we haven't lost the USDA loan yet. They haven't said, take your papers and we're not gonna give you that work, they're done.
Yeah.
Why? Because we're continuing to move forward,
Right.
okay? The minute we stop doing that,
That's exactly.
that, we're gonna get that notice.
If we give up, this hospital will die. We've gotta keep moving forward. I don't care what Ebenezer there says.
Okay, Director Durr, we don't need to do name calling, please. But this is an action item, so, the board does need to.
I'll make a motion that we sign this sublease.
It's been moved by Director Durr, is there?
A second.
And it's been seconded by Director Cassis. Is there any other discussion or comments from the board or the public
I just have,
before we vote?
I had one question.
for Director Knight?
I hesitate to ask it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. We just went through the ethics training, so.
Yeah.
Chet works at Tehachapi Hospital. He also works here. Is that considered a conflict of interest?
He
And
doesn't,
why not?
yeah, he does not have a financial interest in this lease, so it is
Benefits
not,
him in no way.
if he had a financial interest, say he owned the company that was doing the tear down or putting it in place, or the transportation company, then that would be a conflict of interest.
Oh, okay, but there's nothing like that.
Yeah, he's
it actually
acting
turned out to be
as,
fortunate that he was there to, you know, hear about this.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
To hear about this, so.
yeah,
I
he's
can
acting,
understand that.
okay, he's acting in his capacity as a public employee.
Uh-huh.
That he derives no independent financial gain from the transaction.
Not even his salary here.
Well, so government salary, if you're performing your duties as a public official,
Yeah.
that is not a conflict of interest.
make one more little comment that if we can't, if we got it here and we have to pay 6 months at least because the cancellation is 180 days, so that'd be $12,000. 12 to get it here and then 12 to move it to Bakersfield. That's 36,000. If we can wait to see and give that 36,000 to underpaid employees, they could use a raise.
They've gotten raises. They get raises twice a year.
Okay.
I appreciate the comment.
And 12 and 12 is 24,000, not 36.
12 and 12, 12 to go down, 12 to bring it here, and 12 to go to Bakersfield.
No, it's not 12 to take it back to Bakersfield.
We don't have to take it
12
back
to
to
bring it
Bakersfield.
here because of where they're
Oh,
going.
so we don't have
They
to.
just get them here.
A lot less to
Once
take
we
it back to
cancel-
the yard.
When we
They want it
cancel
back,
the
they
lease,
can
I
come
thought the
get it.
lease said it was back to.
No, it goes back to the yard, yes, not back to Tehachapi, so. But it's a lot cheaper to take it back to the yard, is your point.
Yes. Cause that cost includes the future setup,
Right.
that 12.
The item has been moved and it's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Alright,
Okay, any opposed? Okay, that is passed. Item 2 is the capital expenditure request, the mobile clinic. I'll defer to Dr. Davis.
Yes,
So I was at finance and presented my brief version in it's about 50 minutes. So I promise I won't I won't keep you that long. So before you have a capital expenditure request for mobile health clinic. So why is this here? Where did this come from? So for many years we've realized that we've had a problem with the location that we have. You know, I think that we provide great service where we're at. We're kind of nestled down here in Mount Mesa. In the past, we had multiple clinics around the valley, so the hospital was represented around the valley. We don't have that now. We're kind of isolated down here. We know that. We know that we've lost several primary care providers in the area, both physicians and mid-level providers. We have done some to replace that. You know, fortunately, when Dr. Nadler left, we were able to get Dr. Montez. But we've lost several other primary care providers. Like Tim said, we know that this is an issue in the community. It was one of the things that came up in our community needs assessment. So we've known this for quite a while, and we've been looking into various solutions. We've looked at various sites that potentially we could retrofit to meet our needs. Unfortunately, the rules for a rural health clinic are pretty stringent, almost as much as what the hospital has to go through. So that means that it's a very expensive procedure to get a brick and mortar or a freestanding clinic set up. And then we wonder, well, where is that really where we want it? Is that where the community needs us? So a few months ago, Sherry Lanza brought to my notice a grant that would potentially allow, this is a school grant, which would allow the school and the hospital to partner in a mobile medical unit. So unbeknownst to Sherry and I, the grant was also being applied for by our school. We didn't realize that at the time, through a consortia that the school was a part of. And that grant had a much higher chance of success, and there were some limitations if we went through this project through the school. So we started doing a lot of research looking at the possibility of developing a mobile clinic. So what is this mobile clinic? Basically, we're looking at a 2-room mobile unit that can go to various places around the community. One of the biggest places that we're going to see this is at the schools. So, but that's not the only place, but the schools there's a huge need there. At our finance committee, Mr. Parks brought up, a valid point of, well, have you talked to references for this company, or have you talked to people that are actually participating in this program? So I appreciate that. So I listened to that, and I got some references for the vendor that I'm recommending that we go with, and I actually made contact with a gentleman this morning, Albert Grandy. He is the CEO of a large medical group in Savannah, Georgia. And so, I asked the regular standard questions, are you happy with this company? Did they do a good job? Did they provide their service on time? He says, yeah, overall they did a really good job. There was some little production delays, but you'd expect that, with anything like this. So then I asked him, well, how's your program going? What are you doing with this? And, he basically, he's as enthusiastic about the program as I am. So he's going on and on talking about the program and the benefits of it, and everything that he's telling me that is successful in their program is exactly what we want to do with this. He says, Greg, we're using this in our schools. We have four mobile units, and they go to all of the schools. They go to the detention centers. They go down to treat longshoremen. He said the schools are one of the biggest things. They provide dental services there, psychiatric services. They provide mental health services. So all of these, except for the dental, are something that we're looking at doing. And I see that if a program is successbeen, which I'm sure that it's going to be successful, I would like to look in the future about adding dental. We have huge needs in our schools. I've been on the Kernville Union School Board for 8 years. As of Tuesday, I'm gone. Mr. Parks has taken my spot. Mr. Parks behind Mr. Parks. So, anyway, we know that there's a huge need. You know, you think about the mental health needs, and Tiffany, I think you can probably comment on that too, just as much as Sherry can. It is massive, the amount of children that need services, both with psychiatric services and with medical services too. You know, in your packet you see a letter from Robin Shive. Dr. Shive, you know, is definitely in favor of this program, which Sherry is as well. So you know, you think about the child that's coming into school on his first day of kindergarten. He's got his little lunchbox there, but he gets turned away because he hasn't had his physical. And sometimes it can take weeks to get a kid in to be able to go to school. So, or maybe it's a sixth grader that hasn't had his required immunizations. That kid cannot come to school until those immunizations are current. And sometimes, you know, because of provider shortages, we don't have that. So if these services are provided on the school, you know, it's we keep the kid in their academic home. So we're treating the kid in their academic home. We need to start looking at getting away from the model that we have for years of, this is our clinic, you people come to me, and I will provide the services for you. You know, those days are going away. Now we're having to look into pushing ourselves into the community, providing services where consumers need it. If we don't do that, if we aren't accommodating to our patients and their new needs, because needs are different now than they used to be, they're going to go elsewhere. You know, we had a long chat. You came to our staff meeting. We had a long conversation in our staff meeting about, you know, how we need to market ourselves, where we need to look, how mindset of people is changing. So I feel that this is a great program. Just tapping really quickly about, you know, Sherry, you'll be happy to hear this. So one thing that Mr. Granby told me about the program that they have there is they actually looked at the test scores for children at the school before they put these mobile medical and psychiatric units in. And then they followed them every year after that, and they saw a huge increase in their scores. So that's, you know, that's incredible. That's incredible. So
what do they attribute that to?
Because the kids aren't missing school. Kids are, you know, it's hard to concentrate when you've got a toothache. You know, if you have dental abscesses and they aren't being taken care of, it's hard to concentrate. How do you stay focused? You know, when you're sick, or if you're troubled. Unfortunately, we have some troubled children in our valley, and this service, you know, would provide a much higher level of care than what they're getting right now. There are psychiatric services on campus. They're very minimal. They're not provided by the same caliber of providers that would be providing. So I think, you know, one thing, and Chet, you can probably talk about this a little bit more, is talking about the schools, and I know I'm focusing on that, but that's not the only. Our reimbursement for Medi-Cal is much higher than what we get for Medicare. Our PPS rate is what now, about 255. 255. We're basically being reimbursed from Medi-Cal more than what we're even charging. So correct. we charge one rate, and we actually get more than what we even charge. $255 per encounter, whether that's a psychiatric encounter or whether that's a medical encounter. Last thing I wanted to talk about, Chet was talking about the telemedicine aspect of this. So about changes that are occurring. One big thing that, you know, I can't say that this is going to pass, but it's highly likely that it's going to pass, is the National Association of Rural Health Clinics is pushing forward with a bill, not a monetary bill through Congress, but a fix-it bill for trying to fix some things in rural health clinics that are deficient. So with this bill, one of the things would allow a rural health clinic to be what's called the distant site for rural health, or for telemedicine. What that means is right now, the only way that we can do a telemedicine visit is if I'm the patient, I have to go to 4300 Birch and sit in front of a camera right there to be seen for that to count as a telemedicine visit. with this new law, it would allow us to be the distant site. So now, if Dr. Montez is sitting at his desk and there's a child that may have pink eye, maybe Randy Fever says, hey, this kid has pink eye, he's got to go home. So Dr. Montez from our office could go and do a chargeable visit for this child at the school and say, no, this isn't a bacterial conjunctivitis, this is allergies. He can stay at school. The kid doesn't miss any school, or potentially he could have been sent home from school, taken maybe 1, 2, 3 days to get in. With some of our other kids, we've seen even longer of getting in for the provider to say, no, they're fine, they can go to school. So the kid has missed all of that education time. So with that, I'm going to stop and allow questions.
Reimbursement issues and stuff with Kern Health Systems.
So
and with today's technology and everything, I mean, this is a clinic on wheels that can do anything. I mean, you could do physical examinations at the nursing facilities.
This would be an independently licensed rural health clinic.
Yes.
So we would have the same PPS rate as what we have right now, and the application process is much faster. The approval process, I should say, is much faster than with a traditional rural health clinic. So yes, and where can this thing go? This thing technically could go and serve any medically underserved area or health provider shortage area anywhere in California. It couldn't go into Beverly Hills and set up because that's not a medically underserved area, but it could go to Paradise, and we could actually.
Yeah, I was going to say, in case of out of town, we could.
So you could use license to go across county lines and things like
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no plan on doing that. I don't want people thinking that that's what we're planning on doing, but potentially we could. If we had a neighboring community that had a need, then we could set that unit up in their community. Tim talked about or asked you to address the health plan, the payers. So my line in the sand is I will not take this thing onto a school campus where I say we can only serve a little portion of the students there. So what I mean by that is with our Medi-Cal, which is our highest reimbursed payer, and well, if I see someone that, and most of those are managed care, so they're assigned to Kern Family or HealthNet for the most part. If I'm not their PCP or Dr. Montez isn't their PCP, then historically we haven't been able to provide service for those people. So I'm not going to take this thing on campus and say it's only for this little sliver of people. It's only for my patients or Dr. Montez's patients, Dr. Lopez's patients. So Kern Health Systems has stepped up and said we'll make this happen. We're going to find a way to make this happen, so we aren't denying services for the kids. And Kern Health Systems is really important because they're the biggest provider of managed care Medi-Cal services in the county.
Well, they care for 1 in 4 people in the entire county. Roughly 250,000 members in their health plan. There's roughly about 800 and some thousand members of people living in Kern County. So they serve greater than 1 in 4.
How long do you think licensing will take?
Steve Russo, part of the CER includes a proposal for certification application process through WICFLE. The person our contact at WICFLE is Steve Russo. We've used Steve Russo for years in setting up our rural health clinics and tweaking our rural health clinics. He's the guru in California for rural health clinics, and he anticipates just a short period of time. So what I mean by that is that it's going to take longer to get the vehicle through production than it's going to take to
Licensing will
get
be expedited.
Now, there's certain things that can't happen until the unit is actually done, and you have to actually be seeing patients. So some people will actually be seeing there before it's actually a certified clinic. Number one, if we do see any Medi-Cal, we can go backwards and charge for those visits. But the other thing is we can be creative on how which patients we serve there. So an example is I'm the only one in the valley that can do DOT physical exams. So we can do DOT physical exams. If we have this thing set up somewhere in the community, they could do those exams all right there. So so we aren't going to have a loss by not charging a Medi-Cal patient.
I think maybe to answer that question, what is the production time on the vehicle from time ordered?
So they anticipate production time for 150 days. And that can go longer, it could potentially be shorter. One problem that we have facing us is Amazon, believe it or not. Because Amazon is gobbling up all of these big truck chassis, because they're doing their own shipping now. So that's caused a dent in this industry. We had the opportunity about 3 weeks ago to purchase a unit that would be actually $17,000 less than what you see in the CER, but that got gobbled up fast. It was a 2016 unit, so now the only thing left is 2019 units. And but our vendor has said as long as we proceed in a timely fashion, so as long as it's approved tonight, he's going to honor the quote that he gave us for. So basically, we would have a 2019 chassis at the 2018 price.
Greg, I believe that Director Knight had a question or comment. Then we'll come to it.
Yeah. Okay. I did have a question. In my long experience of raising children, I raised 4 children in how many years? I'm still raising them. But anyhow, it's always been my experience in whatever school they went to, it is the parents' responsibility to provide their medical care. Now, how would you coordinate the school seeing the child in the clinic, in the mobile clinic, with the parent's consent?
Okay, so very important question, hugely important question actually, and something that we have looked at. Because when we set up this unit, we have to get out of the box that we've been thinking in for a long time about how things are done. We need to use technology. We've already talked at our IS committee about how can we have a parent, because if a parent can get to the school, they may be able to get their kid over to 4300 Birch. It's possible, or they may struggle with that. So if someone needs to be seen, if a child needs to be seen on the campus, we have ways of the parent being able to log in and do like a DocuSign and basically signing consent, as long as the parent is available for whichever provider is seeing the child. So that the child would be seen in conjunction with the parent, in conversations with the parent. It's not ideal. Ideally, we always want the parent to be there, especially when it comes to something like a well child check. But if we're doing behavioral health, once the child gets established, then the parents are going to have more comfort, and they're going to be able to keep. There may not necessarily have to be that regular communication, but it's very important, and it will always be there. We want to make sure that this unit, beyond that, is widely open to walk-ins. So, and obviously you can't walk in on the school campus, because we can't have just random people coming into the school to be seen. But when it's out in the community, we want to have signs up that say free blood pressure checks, free finger sticks for glucose, basically diabetes screening. So then and having ways where people can put in their history information, on maybe an iPad, something like that. So it's an important thing, something that we have thought about. And it's kind of like my comment to Kern Health Systems. We need to find a way of making this happen. We have to, because so many times we find, we can't do this because of this. Well, are we sure? Are there ways around this? There's got to be better ways to do things. So.
Again, going back to what I think as Greg indicated around, we and I have been looking at potential sites for a second clinic for 5 or 6 years, 7 years, and so forth. And obviously, like I say, we have a 400 plus square miles of geography that we've got to cover, and all of our resources are literally right here. We have no presence across the lake. We have no presence up in the hills. And those are areas that we need to be able to get up to. And like I said, you wonder why we don't have support sometimes, because people don't know the services we can provide. This really provides us an opportunity to get the hospital out into the community at a substantially lower cost than if we had to go build a bricks and mortar building or renovate a building or whatever. So I think, clearly this allows us an opportunity to obviously begin looking at certain population areas and seeing, hey, is there enough volume here to support this down the road where we may want to later on, but not having to do that today with the money and so forth, so.
You'd be able to provide
Keep that in mind,
sports physicals at the schools.
Right.
Yeah, the school's already presented, and honestly, even without this unit, Mike Genthner has asked me, he's the athletic director at the high school, to do something where we can do sports physicals for the kids right on the campus. Because once again, it's the same thing. A kid wants to play football, but he's disappointed because he can't, he can't participate until I sign that green card. We can, we can potentially have, clinics set up where we do the youth football kids. We can, find the specific needs in the area. One thing I thought about is, well, why would this unit not be up at Whiskey Flat? We have 100,000 people up here, over that weekend. There are people that need things.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they don't know the hospital's here, but they do see that there's a clinic there, I don't want them, bypassing us and missing the rest of their fun day if there's something that we can take care of here as opposed to them going down to Bakersfield or Ridgecrest.
Rick, I just want to make a comment. In the evaluation process of the concept, in the month of September, when we were in that evaluation process, I actually took this concept to a meeting in Reno, Nevada, of the critical access hospital financial managers for all the critical access hospitals that could attend, as well as representatives from the District Leadership Hospital Forum, which are the larger district hospitals in the state of California, plus representatives from the Hospital Council and CHA. They're all there in attendance, and I brought this concept up to them. Before that day was over, I had 3 hospitals ask me for the particulars of what we had done thus far. It is definitely something that's right now in thought process with many of the providers out there in critical access hospitals, and to be on the forefront of doing this is certainly a good thing, in my opinion, because we have a service that we're getting in the front end of that maybe if we didn't, some others would do it. And it's just as Greg said, truthfully, with a mobile unit, you can cross your district lines as long as there's a service need. I mean, if that was really important, to have the unit go up to Lone Pine and do the same thing at their schools. Okay, so think about the possibilities that this actually brings to pass.
We have from the public real quick.
Right. That's just an assumption that those grades were increased because of this clinic that you were talking about, right?
Oh, sure. Well, it's not an assumption. I didn't ask for the studies,
But other stuff.
but it's his.
Just
it's
a
his
thing,
statement that-
what important is. Sorry about that. We know how much it's gonna cost. You said there's a grant for it?
No, we initially looked at, there was a school-based grant that was available. That it was a very peculiar grant, and to me it almost seemed like it was kind of designed for what it ended up getting awarded for. So it was a grant that we started the process in September, I believe, Sherry, was it?
End of August, beginning of September.
End of August, beginning of September. We had to have it in by October. The awards were just announced about 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. And it was a grant that actually would start on January 1st, and it would go for 9 months. We would be hard pressed to get this thing up and running, certified by the time the grant period was over, so it was really unlikely. So what the service that we are providing, it's a consortium of several LEAs or several schools within Kern County, where they'll expand psychological services to kids. Now, that still is not the type of service that we're providing. We're talking about providing direct services with an LCSW or a clinical psychologist or a PA nurse practitioner or a physician for the medical side. So totally different, different than what, they're gonna have some, I don't know, Sherry, but, on what the particulars are about what services they're actually gonna perform, but it's not gonna be dedicated to just Kernville Union School District. It's,
Yeah, it's about half a dozen school districts that we would share that same grant.
So is there gonna be a return on investment on this? Is there gonna be a moneymaker? We're gonna get referrals out of it?
So, I maybe I can let Chet talk about the actual dollar reimbursements, but the way that I look at it is, especially because really we're catering more to our Medi-Cal patients. We're available to everyone, but Medi-Cal is our moneymaker. If we're looking at a $400,000 investment, and we're getting $255 return, if we're just looking at it those simplistic terms, and that's not talking about other operating expenses, but I mean that's 1,600 encounters until it covers the capital expense. That's not very much.
We do have an urgency now created by the vendor to do this tonight, right?
I wouldn't make a decision just because we're going to save $5,000 on the unit. I think every dollar helps. There's some things that are going to be tweaked on this CER. For example, the wheelchair lift. We need to really decide, is that worth it to us and to our community? It may be, it may not be, but there are ways around that. I think our financial consultant, Steve Russo, can help us with that to make sure to find out whether it's actually required by law, number one, and number two, we can find out, we can actually build the unit around this thing going in or not going in. So basically we could put a door in there, we could have the electric running for the lift and not actually even put it in. So it's a big thing. To me it's a little expense because it's about $12,000 in the price of the vehicle. That's not huge, but there's a huge expense in space. So we're talking about an examination room that's going to be about 8 by 10 feet, and we're taking 18 inches by 4 feet, and taking that space up for the wheelchair lift. So we just need to see what our needs are and what's required.
What people also don't know, Greg, and let's talk about the money maker aspect of it, is that the $255 is simply an interim payment. Let's say, for example, that you have a Kern Health Systems patient, okay? Well, we don't get $255 up front from a Kern Health Systems patient. We get maybe $65 up front for a Kern Health Systems patient. But let's say that there's so few patients in a year's time that when we take the total cost of the unit and salaries that are associated with it, and we divide that by the number of visits, instead of being $255, let's say it's $355, okay? But when you're talking about Medi-Cal patients, because of the Affordable Care Act, you actually have your patients, you do a report that's talking about our cost is $355, not $255. You keep track of that, you bill it to the state of California, and they pay you the difference if they agree that is your cost. So it could be not just $255, it could be $355. I represent one hospital that their actual rate is $500 as of July, $503 per visit. $503. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, significant.
We haven't always had the volume of Medi-Cal here. Probably it started around 90 or 95. And it could decrease some. I'm not saying we're gonna get rid of all the Medi-Cal, but once the dam project is finished, it could change things to where there's less, but I don't think it'll be that much less to make that much of a difference. However, the Affordable Care Act keeps changing little by little, and it came in and gave us a big windfall. It can gradually go away too, so, but overall, it sounds good.
I think it is gonna go up and down, but, bottom line is this is, you know, there's not industry up here that drives, you know, large incomes with, you know, private insurance. Yeah, it's probably gonna be the nature of the beast for at least the life of this project, we're gonna be primarily looking at Medi-Cal.
Yeah, Charlie, I'll come back to you, because
Okay,
Kay, go for it, and then we'll go to Charlie.
Okay, I have looked at all these that we have here in the book. It seems to me that you like Steve Russo's. Which one was his? Was his one
Okay,
fly?
Steve Russo is attached to every one, because that's the consultant. That's for the.
That's tied into one. Well, which one of these would you recommend?
So there are 3 vendor quotes in here. There's one from, and I've actually been to 2 of the plants. About 3 weeks ago, I went to the plant in Riverside, I went to the plant in Phoenix. So AGI or Aleph Group. I went there first.
Were they in Phoenix?
No, that one's in Riverside. From there, the next day, I went to Phoenix and looked at their product. Now, you know, you'll see that on the CER, we wrote rejected on there because it really didn't meet our needs. Number one, and then there was another vendor from Ohio. We eliminated the vendor from Ohio because the cost was very high, even though one of the other references that I got today said that they've purchased from Farber, which is in Ohio, and they said that they provide a very good product, but to me it's cost prohibitive. So I went planning on going with the lowest vendor, which would be Magnum Mobile, until I went there. You know, when I went and I saw the production quality at AGI versus Magnum, it's different. So just in a nutshell, the difference is at AGI in Riverside, Alphas Group, they basically build the entire box around the truck chassis, and everything is custom built with that. Now the unit in Phoenix is not like that. It's basically they get a box that's made by a manufacturer, they plop it on there, and they're basically, you know, great people out there. Man, they're just such a nice guy that owns that company. But I think Bob and his crew could do the same thing that they were doing. And so
I would go better. He reviewed each of these detail by detail with me, and the caliber of the quality of the finish, because they build their own box, they build raceways, they build things in. It's just so far superior to purchasing a box that is made to haul freight.
Yeah.
And then try and adapt this stuff to it. So there is a substantial difference in the quality of the finish. There's much better quality of finish in the cabinet work that's inside. Just a whole lot of issues.
Plus the finish section of the materials used. One is
yes.
basically pressed wood.
Right.
And the other is
very high quality.
You know.
Yes.
The other, it was demonstrated that you put a torch to it and it won't catch on fire, and it's, you know, 1/4 the weight of the other liner. To answer questions about is this a moneymaker, nobody ever likes to state out loud that you're gonna make money off people having health needs. But it's the reality of the situation. The number one priority is that this is something that would be greatly utilized and welcomed in this valley. It's totally stepped into the 21st century, again, in my opinion, and use the technology and take the hospital to them. And is it going to be a moneymaker? Yeah, I think so. I think, it will allow us another venue, another revenue stream to accomplish the things that we need to do to this hospital that obviously the voters don't want to be bothered with anymore. But I know our primary concern here is just offering this service to the valley. It'd be a huge benefit to everybody here.
And even, we even look in our clinic, and it doesn't happen all the time, but what would you say, Dr. Montez? How many times did we close last year because of power failures in our clinic?
Yeah.
At least 2 times. So, we canceled patients for all of the providers for a significant amount of time, but if this thing was just parked, even if it was parked right next to the clinic, we fire it up and it's good to go.
Just like I said, this, you can talk about the fire, you know, that we had, Erskine Fire.
Well, there's,
You know,
Edison
clinics-
has also shut down the electricity.
Right, yes, I'll get to that in a second, that's a good point. The issue is obviously we lost our clinic and our ability to see patients over here. And it wasn't primarily because we were able to get some mobile generators that will certainly allow us to power that back up. But, you know, the point is great, it's a great point, is well made. You know, the bottom line is that we certainly would have ability to see patients right there in the event that happened, at any time when it happened. What Chet's referencing is the fact that the state of California now, under certain conditions, that the power companies have the ability to dictate to the communities that they are going to shut off the power. And we have appealed to them, to the state, if this is not right, because that affects the hospital's power. You know, obviously we have a generator here, but as in most hospitals, the generator will not supply all the power needs the hospital has. So, you know, it's important, obviously, that we never know when those things are going to happen. When you get high winds and temperatures and stuff like that, like we've had, very dry conditions, and that they're concerned about brush fires. In order to save their power grids and those kinds of things, they will shut those off, and they may be off for days, we've been told. So this is something that all the hospitals here in California that live in fire zones are having to deal with. So it's nice to be able to have some options, you know, and to see patients, you know, when they need to. So that's a side thing. I'll hopefully never have that happen again.
So I just had a quick question, maybe you can answer it, Tim. Say this goes into the other districts and other boundaries, do those areas then employ staff, their own staff?
No, this will be our staff.
It'll be our staff, okay, gotcha.
I have no plans on ever doing that.
Right.
I'm just saying that
It could.
that's the flexibility of this kind of project.
But it's probably not a bad idea when you think about what happened in Paradise or Ventura or.
You know, case in point, in the Erskine fire, Clinica Sierra Vista brought their unit up here, and I don't know if they actually saw any patients up here, but they actually brought the unit up here, and it was available at that time.
Question. Who would drive this?
This does not require a Class A or Class B license. It's a regular Class C license because it's under 26,000 pounds.
And they wouldn't be home.
And you're not carrying patients.
You're not carrying patients,
No.
no.
It's like buying a motorhome, Kay.
Yeah.
You can, which, that's another story that's always scared me to death for years.
Serve my purpose.
Director Katz has said it.
I don't have a question, but I just have a comment. There is a letter of recommendation or a possible contract with the school system to use this to evaluate students, and that it could be utilized with the new telemedicine that their district is introducing into the area. When I looked at this, there's quite a lot of information in there, and we at length examined it in the finance committee. And when I look at what the public has offered for the district twice, turning down the measures that we need passed to be able to go on and operate in the black, as it would be said in Chet's language. If we can make money in the interim with something of this type, to be able to go ahead and do at least the emergency room, seismic upgrade, things like that. If we can make money in the meantime, possibly we will be able to fund, is what I'm thinking, maybe little bits and pieces of the seismic upgrade ourselves. I don't know if that's possible. That would be in Chet's field to, you know, at the beginning and the end, because a lot of times, like you said, you put money away, thank God, and we had the surplus to be able to absorb the loss of what's happening all over the whole system of healthcare. And the way I look at things is that there's a reason for these things to come up with this idea of a mobile clinic. They're doing it in other areas. This isn't a brand new idea. They're doing it in other countries, for sure, because there is no access, especially in Mexico. There is no access in so many areas because of logistics, because of what they have to be able to fund those things and take care of them. If we could change what's going on with the absenteeism and some of the other things that are going on in the schools in this valley, in Kern River Valley, that is an important factor. A lot of times you have to look at the measures that are passed by this hospital district. Sometimes they don't make money, but they're of such value to the community that you look at it and you say, we have to pass it. We have to go for it because it's of that much value to the people. And I've been looking at that whole thing, saying, if the taxpayers do not want to pay 40 years for a measure, then let's try this. Let's keep trying different ways. There's always a new way and new innovative ideas with employees, with other people, to come up with something that will help. And if we don't keep doing it, then we're lost.
And the interesting situation, especially the critical access hospital, the question isn't, or certainly to me, and it shouldn't be, are you gonna make money with this?
Right.
The question is, are you gonna cover your variable costs? Are you gonna break even? That's the question.
Right.
You're right.
And
You're right.
like I said,
That's the
if it
PC
comes
way.
up that we only are servicing the community, but if that isn't a value, then we as a people have lost.
Gentleman I spoke to this morning in Georgia, he said that they actually looked at doing brick and mortar clinics in the schools, and they found that it's just a no-brainer to keep it as a mobile. You know, just the rules, you know, just cost so much, and you know you'd have to do that at every school site, because this isn't just going to go to Woodrow Wallace Elementary. This is, you know, I didn't have a chance to actually speak to Kim Villani, but you spoke to Kim, and she's very in favor of this at South Fork. John Myers, I've had lots of conversations with him about this. You know, he's in favor of it. They're
Paiute Mountain School, Kelly.
Paiute Mountain Schools, you know, is another person, and you know.
You reached out also to the board of cares.
Sure. I spoke to Cheryl Parmalee, and you know, she runs 2 board and care facilities in Wofford Heights and Kernville, and the caliber of patients that they see has just increased and increased. It's very difficult for them to transport them all the way over here or to whoever their primary care provider is. It's very difficult. If we could provide pull this thing up and we see their residents one day a month, you know, she was just saying, oh my gosh, that would be just so, you know, so incredible. You know, some of the patients, because of transportation issues, they just can't come over here, you know, more than a couple times in a year, some of them.
Greg, Ms. Tiafill had a
Greg, question is how much the AGI unit costs, and Chet, how is it gonna be paid for those of us that don't have the packet, so we don't.
And what's the upfront? What's the upfront charge?
Well, the terms center.
I'll talk about the price of the cost of the unit. So with AGI, if we keep it exactly how the proposal is written, it's $317,000 for that. We have a quote for for the licensing certification process, which would be about $15,000. It's an hourly rate, but they anticipate that it would be about $15,000 for that application. So with that, they're providing the actual application. They're advising us on policies, what policies need to be written, what things we need to do to comply. So that part is definitely well worth the expense. And as far as what we pay up front, it's 50% up front with the vendor that I'm recommending. The remainder of the balance would be due on delivery of the vehicle. And how it's going to be paid for, that's
How we're
Mr.
gonna
Chuck
pay
Buck.
for it? Actually, it's a situation where, just as you said, there's some upfront money and some after the fact. The upfront money will come from, there's about $153,000 left in our fund for the clinic, even since we've paid the retention purposes. And the upfront money probably would come out of that particular fund. The subsequent money would come on a piecemeal basis based on what we see from, it's because it's going to have to be right after the fact. We usually move that out a little bit. It will come from money that we probably already have to some degree, but will be replaced by money that we get at year end from the additional allowable cost that comes from medical.
The float.
Yeah.
So,
At what point would you contact LNC for the certification?
Say that again?
At what point in this process would you contact LNC to come and certify the
licensing.
You actually start
licensing?
from the application starts early on.
If you were to approve this tonight, I already have a meeting set up with Steve Russo for Friday afternoon for just a brief, like how do we set this up?
All right. Well, if we're ready, are we ready?
Confident,
for a
aren't you?
motion?
Is an action.
I would like to move that we accept Greg's proposal and HDI's proposal for this.
Okay, so there's a motion by Director Knight to approve Greg's recommendation of HEI.
Second.
Second by Director Durr. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, has passed.
Just a question about this. Scott, would you be looking at this contract?
Yep.
And there's some minor things in the Whipley contract, reference to us being Kern Medical Center, that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Thank you for all the work.
Thank you for all
I
your
think it's a
hard work.
fantastic,
Thank you, Greg.
fantastic possibilities.
Item I is Director's comments on items not appearing on the agenda. And again, these are strictly just Director's comments, so we'll start with Director Knight and kind of look over.
Okay, thank you, John. First of all, I would like to congratulate the new 3 board members. Well, John's been here for a while, so, but congratulations tonight anyhow. And also Gene Parks and Sherry Montez. Congratulations and best wishes for success and happiness. Hey, we need a happy board, and it's been happy,
That's
and I've
me.
enjoyed it. So. I would like to thank my fellow board members, the administrative staff, the employees, the volunteers from the auxiliary and the foundation for the wonderful tenure that I've experienced with all of you as a member of this board. Your support and encouragement has been wonderful. This is your healthcare district, and I hope for its greatest success in the future. You all have my best wishes for great progress and healthy strides in the years to come. So, I love you all. And I love the district.
Thank you, Kay.
You're welcome.
Director Bush, you have anything?
Yeah, I just want to say both to Kay and to David, thank you so much for your service to this district. You've been, I said last month, you've been mentors to me, and have had the patience to fill in the blanks. I got that blank stare on my face. I've learned a lot. It's truly an honor to serve on this board. It's been a very, very amiable experience. I mean, everybody has been on the same page with this, and I'm gonna miss you guys. I will, but I'm also looking forward to working with Sherry and Jean as well. We got a lot ahead of us, and I like your attitude, and I'll repeat what you say. You know, we can't quit. You know, we just have to keep moving forward and find ways to get this done. I think we're on our way to doing it.
Thank you, Charlie.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I would like to express my gratitude to administrative staff, to the rest of our staff, to the public for trusting me for 8 years. I believe that in that time, or certainly when I was chairman, I was chairman for 5 years, I really felt strongly that a lot of the problems the district had were due to, in part, a dysfunctional board of directors. Administration cannot do their job effectively if the board can't do its job effectively.
Amen.
Yes, it's like we gotta be friends. That doesn't mean we don't consider, somebody else's opinion. It means we have a job to do. It's our mission statement. It's nothing else. It's just the mission statement. It's not Democrat. It's not Republican. It's not, conservative. It's not liberal. It's our mission statement. Period. Okay. One of the most important things, and I'm really happy that the board members took it to their heart, was participation in the board education program. If the board is going to make informed decisions, the board needs to be informed. Coming onto the board with an idea that you already know everything is just counterproductive. You got to come in with an open mind, and you got to learn. You got to learn, and you got to realize that learning curve you're facing is critically important to the functionality of the board that you participate in it. So many people. Chet, I so deeply appreciate your work in restructuring our debt. That was absolutely vital to us being around now, okay? And the fact that you did it overnight. Listen, hey, we got a smart guy here. We gotta keep this guy on. Tim, I've been around the valley a long time, and I've seen some of the train wrecks we had for leadership, okay? And, having you in here, and, attending conferences, educational conferences, various things, it's like, guys like this are not dime a dozen, okay? They're not. And it's like, if you got a bad employee, you get rid of them. But when you get a good one, you hang on to it, okay? Under Tim's leadership, this district is one of the very few in the state that's profitable, okay? And that's a great deal, due to these two guys right here, okay? I just want to tell you, I appreciate the things I've learned from you. I have good working relationships with everybody here, but beyond that, it's like friendships develop and trust develops, and that's a good thing to have in your life. I've taken a great deal of satisfaction and feeling of usefulness while being on the board, and I'd like to thank you all.
I don't have anything else to say. Thank you.
And again, I want to thank both Kay and David for all your service on the board. I'm not done with both of you yet because I have one more thing to do. Secondly, I want to thank the public for coming out this evening. Public input is always important. I know we sometimes get a little passionate about certain things, but but we need this feedback. I mean, I think the board concurs that we want this place to be viable and continue to serve the residents of the valley. So I hope to see more of the public, and if we get more public, we're probably gonna have to move the meetings to back to the cafeteria. So, and a Merry Christmas to all of you as well. And before we adjourn, I do have some plaques to give out to our, if I can get it open.
This is rehearsal for a couple of weeks from now.
Okay, this is in appreciation for your contribution to Kern Valley Healthcare District Board of Directors from 2006 to 2018. Of course, you've been here forever when Bob was CEO and when he was on the board. But we certainly appreciate it.
Thank you, thank you.
Now stand up and show it to the camera, because the
Oh, she was standing. I'm sorry, it was wide open.
Go ahead and stand up.
Wide open.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
You need to get in there too.
And then I'll get both of you.
Yeah, I'll sign it on my name. That's okay. Thank you, Deborah.
And then to David.
Oh, wow, I never expected anything. Oh, my goodness. Oh, thank you. Oh,
And David, thank you for all your
Oh, you got
dedication to the Kern Valley Healthcare District Board of Directors, including your 8 years as chairman of the board. Oh, well, she wants one more thing.
Yeah,
You want me in the middle, or?
I know the camera's not gonna want 4 pictures. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
They'll do like they did with me and always pick the worst one.
And if there's
It is nice.
nothing else, we are adjourned at